the U.S. Information Agency was the entity in government that established the way that the United States presented itself to the world. It had a multiplicity of programs. It had budgets that ranged up to multi-millions of dollars, topping off at about $1.4 billion in 1994. Its programs included such things as the Fulbright Fellowships, which were present in 140 countries, libraries, English language programs, and through one of its divisions, which was called Arts America, the export of artistic, primarily the performing arts, but some visual arts, to countries in all parts of the world. Toward the end of the 1980s, it became obvious that a lot of the efforts that the USIA was undergoing were in fact having some effect. Basically, the USIA was attempting to make sure that communism didn't overtake the world. The Cold War was a war of ideology. It was a contest between democracy in the United States and the Western countries against the communist ideology of the Soviet Union. By 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. And then in 1991, the Soviet Union simply imploded. Both of those events were in response to much of the work that was done by the USIA. Some people were critical of the USIA because they believed that it was propagandistic because it had a state motivation, that is for democracy to overtake communism in the world. And there was some question about whether or not the truth was actually being told in the various forms that it was presented by different agencies that were, in effect, the mouthpiece for USIA. In the beginning of the 1990s, we thought we had a new world. We thought we were suddenly free of the threat of communism. And as a consequence, there were major calls for taking a look at whether or not we needed USIA to continue operations. This was exacerbated by the fact that in the early 90s, the United States was involved in a very deep recession. And you may recall that Newt Gingrich in his contract with America recommended that, that various agencies be cut back. Some of them included the National Endowment for the Arts, USAID, and most importantly, the U.S. Information Agency. The budget in 1994, as I said before, of USIA was about $1.4 billion in 1994. In that year, Congress moved to decrease funding by approximately a third, so that the budget dropped substantially by 1995. Then in 1996, Arts America, which was the division, the exchange division within USIA that was responsible for bringing arts to foreign countries, was simply eliminated. Ultimately, in 1999, USIA was dismantled. Its functions were distributed among three major agencies: the Department of State, Department of Defense, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors, which houses things like Voice of America. Following in the spring of 1999, unbeknownst to anybody because it was really a secret document that was signed by President Clinton, it was agreed that the public diplomacy function would be dispersed throughout government, and that it actually would be dispersed among some 12 different agencies, the three main ones being State, Defense, and BBG. But it also included the FBI, CIA, Commerce, Trade, the Treasury, the National Security Council, and of course all of the cultural agencies such as NEH and NEA. It wasn't really until the the World Trade Center bombing and the subsequent, our subsequent move into Iraq, that it became clear that our cultural diplomacy infrastructure had really been decimated by this disinvestment that had occurred over the period of 1994 to 2003. And the consequence was that there were many calls from Congress, we've got to fix it, we've got to do something. There were dozens of conferences held, there were reports written. The Pew Foundation was taking the pulse of the world insofar as what the world thought of the U.S. And just after we entered the war with Iraq, our public opinion polls just plummeted like a stone. The Bush administration created a new office, the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, which was designed to correct some of the disengagement that had occurred after USIA was eliminated. And unfortunately, from, I guess, between 2003 and 2007, that position was held by 6 different people. And out of all of those years, almost 4 years, the position was simply vacant. And that gave, there was really a power struggle in the Bush administration. And Donald Rumsfeld felt that since he, of course, knew about this secret document that had dispersed public diplomacy function to other agencies, including defense, and he and others marginalized Colin Powell, who had less and less money, less and less stature, and as a consequence, the traditional agency that had been responsible for public diplomacy was really in a much reduced position, and it laid the door open for the Department of Defense to assume increasing responsibility in this field.